All right, this is episode 60. This is a great one with Steve Wariner. Steve, Grand Ole Opry member. He is one of the best guitar players out there, fantastic singer, songwriter. He's had so many great hits over the years, and I just love this guy. He's fantastic and such a nice person as well. Also joining me on this podcast is my co-host, Mr. Jim Witter, a great friend of mine. And we, all three of us, actually just collaborated on a great song called Turn in the Road for my Stonehouse sessions. And you can get that on YouTube. Just search for Darren Walters. You find all that information on my YouTube page. Also, don't forget about our sponsors. Morning Buzz Coffee Company is based out of Hamilton, Ontario. They're a small batch coffee company. They specialize in fair trade organic coffees, and they are musicians as well. Make sure you check them out, morningbuzzcoffee.buzz on the internet. Also, Music City, Canada. It's your one-stop music shop based out of London, Ontario. I buy lots there, as I always mention, and they have everything there you could ever imagine, musiccitycanada.com. Also, My Grandfather's Fiddle, one-of-a-kind custom t-shirts. Treat those you love to a memory of a lifetime. And I always say the easiest thing is to go right to their website and check out everything they do. Great Christmas presents, great ideas there, mygrandfathersfiddle.com, or on Facebook, just search for My Grandfather's Fiddle. All right, this is a great one. Sit back and enjoy our conversation with Steve Wariner. Okay, we are here officially with a special guest, Steve Wariner. So nice to have you here. And also joining us, special guest host as well, my good friend Jim Witter. And it's awesome to have both of you guys here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Darren and Jim. Glad to be with both of you guys.
It's so nice. Steve and I go way back. And
we do.
Like 94. I mean that's back there for me now when I think about it, because
it is.
I was starting out.
Recently, how I met you, and I was going like, oh my gosh, I guess it was on that Chevy Drive tour we did, wasn't it?
It was on your Chevy Drive tour, and I just got lucky. Your opening acts were Cassandra Vasic and Larry
Stewart.
Yeah, and his bus broke down when you were heading into Canada, and I got a phone call from my agent that afternoon at like 2:00 in the afternoon. Said, can you get your band together because Steve Wariner needs another supporting act for tonight? And we hadn't played in like months. And I called all the guys, and we showed up like 2 hours later, and that was it.
Tim, I interrupt you and you said, I'm sorry, who?
Oh, no. And I'll just quickly elaborate on that story because I'll never forget it. We opened the show. Darren, were you playing with me in that band?
I was not, but the coolest thing was I was in the audience. I had bought tickets to see the show. Yeah, I was there. I was at Center in the Square, right?
Yeah. Center in the Square. And so it was. So I started the show, and I remember while Cassandra Vasic was doing her set, you came to my dressing room, Steve.
Yeah, I remember.
Somebody said Steve would like to meet you, and you came in and you just thanked me for filling in at last second like that. And I just thought that was so cool that you actually made the effort to come and speak to me. And
I remember that very well. And I do remember that I watched your show too. And I was like, man, damn, I got to meet this guy. You were doing some great stuff. And I was really impressed and also impressed on top of that you pulled that together so quickly and were there. So, and that's the start of it, Jim. You and I were off Wheels Up, and we were gone.
Yep.
But when you came to Nashville, we were together. It was our friendship was launched that day. So
I think it was, and I think it's a testament to the person that you are.
Man.
Just real genuine. Like, I say this to a lot of people all the time. I say the greatest guitar player is also the greatest guy on the face of the planet. It's true.
That's mighty nice of you to say. It's audio, but I'm blushing right now. Thank you for that, Jim.
Well, I look at you guys that
Sorry, Darren.
No, I look at you two, both of you guys, and you're like brothers as far as I'd see it. And you both have such a similar personality. So gracious, the both of you guys, and just super nice, down to earth people. I don't know two people that are more alike than
we are kind of like brothers. And it's funny that our interests are so similar, right, Jim? Because I remember talking to you one day and I said, hey, I know this is kind of corny, but I do magic. I do some close-up. And Jim goes, oh, so do I. And I go, what? Then we talked.
I still got my membership card in the Hamilton Junior Magicians Club.
Love it. I love it. Every now and then somebody will bring that up. They'll go, hey, you do magic, right? And I go, well, I used to. I don't know anymore much. But yeah, we used to, I remember you and I'd get some new tricks or something. I'd say, oh, Jim, check this out, man.
I remember it actually during co-writing sessions with you. We'd, write for an hour and a half or something like that. And then out would come the deck of cards and be like, oh, Jim, have you seen this one? Or,
have you seen this?
Yeah.
And speaking of with Cassandra Bassett, her and her band were always so nice. We toured all across Canada. I mean, totally West Coast to East Coast, man. I mean, unbelievable. And I did that proud to say that I did that about 3 times in my career. I've done coast to coast. I'm proud and love it that I know a lot about Canada. I used to, but yeah. I should say I've seen almost every inch of Canada, and I love it. How different it is to the different parts. But Cassandra's band was always so nice. And speaking of magic, I remember in Toronto one night we played, and her guitar player, and I'm forgetting
Bernie Labarge.
Say that again.
Bernie Labarge.
Bernie, I'm so glad you said that because I'm having a senior moment. But Bernie gave me a magic book, and it was a real old antique magic book as a gift. The tour was winding down, so excuse me, or starting to wind down, and he gave me this a gift, and it blew me away because we got to be friends and we hung out, would play backstage and all that. And anyway, you'd love this book, Jim. It's really an old magic book, So.
Yeah, for sure.
That's pretty good. I'm not sure, Steve, if you remember this. The first time I met you was on a cruise ship, and it was a country music cruise on the Norway. Do you remember that?
Man, oh my gosh. Who are you there with, Darren?
I was playing with just a local guy here. His name was Billy Newdorf, and we were playing nightly in the club. So we were the band that played.
Hey, and I've done the Norway. I bet I've played on that Norway, which is not in commission anymore, I don't think.
Right.
But I played aboard that ship on those same kind of cruises probably 5 or 6 times. I did one with Merle Haggard. The last
one I was on.
Yeah. And we wrote a song on that trip. Merle and I wrote a song, and honestly, I started writing. It was a pretty good cruise for me because I started writing. I knew when I got back home, I was going to get on a plane and go to LA to write with Clint Black for the first time. I knew Clint, but I'd never written with him. And so I wanted to go in with some stuff, as I always do, and try to anyway. And I started nothing but the taillights on that ship, on that cruise.
Wow.
And
now I almost, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but I want to say I almost made it on that cruise because you and Karen invited Becky and I.
That's right.
As your guests on that cruise. And Rosalind had just been born. She was like months old at the time. And
I remember that, Jim.
We couldn't do it. And that was one of the biggest sort of regrets of my life, was not being able to go on that tour, because I would have seen you, Darren. I would have seen obviously you. I probably would have met Merle.
Oh, you would have, and maybe ridden with him too.
Don't.
No, you just don't know. Way to go, Jim.
Loser.
No, but I'll tell you what, Rod's bragging on her for a moment. She was just born in that story there, but what a beautiful little angel voice, man. She's got a great, I don't mean little as in little, I just mean a beautiful voice and a talented girl. Man, what a great singer.
Thank you. I have to say that I'm very proud of her. She's very unique. singer, and I think you're going to hear a lot more from her in the months and years to come.
I tell you what, man, I wish things were different and we were closer together. I'd like to be involved in some stuff with her. I just love making music with you guys. And
well, you know what? Maybe we can make something happen. I mean, I know we're living in strange times right now, but I think one of the things we're learning is that we don't have to be that close together to collaborate and to work on projects together. Like we just,
haven't we, Jim? We've been working on stuff together, and Darren, us too. We've been working on some music together, and that's fantastic. The technology is incredible these days. Sound like an old guy here, but it's incredible that you can do it. What we just did with Turn in the Road, and
because you recorded Turn in the Road, which is a song that you and I wrote together.
Yep.
That was on your Faith in You album, was it not?
That was on Capitol. That was my, I did 3 albums at Capitol, and it was my 3rd album. Capitol.
Wow. And then just recently, Darren found the beginning of a recording that we did at his studio with me singing it, and completely forgot about it. And in the old days, we would have had to have all, gotten together in the same studio together to finish this project. And here we are now, in 2020, being able to, collaborate. It sounds like we're all in the same room together. It's just so cool.
Sometimes I worry about the energy, because as you guys well know, there's nothing like the energy of everybody in the room playing together. And we did it. I mean, you certainly feel it on that record. But boy, really great job, too, Jim. Bragging on you, man. A great performance on that. And Darren, it sounds great. I can't wait to see the video on it and see how it all turned out. But really, really good, man. Really proud of that.
So am I.
Yeah, it's a special song, and I think it's perfect for these times. And
I do too.
Video looks good. I'll send it to you when we're done. It's all done.
Can't wait.
So yeah, it's neat. It's interesting. I've done a few of these now where I've collaborated with people from all over the place, and you get tracks in, and it's a way different way of listening to people's playing and getting to know them. When they're in the studio, you've got a bunch of guys playing, and you're listening to it as a whole, right? And when you but when you get tracks in from somebody, it's really like hitting solo and really listening to what actually happened, and it's pretty neat. It's neat, especially on drummers. I mean, you really gotta get an idea of what a drummer does if he rushes into a fill, or if he doesn't rush, and in a performance, usually everyone kind of follows them, right? Or it just kind of moves with them. But when it's just on their own, you find out a lot about players pretty quick.
I really try to, what little bit that I do with the doing files and playing long distance, I really try to think in terms of how would I do this if everybody was here, and so I try to keep that in mind. It's hard to do sometimes, but try to keep that energy up and try to make it be. It's funny with drums too. You can hear the drummers, they grunt and make noises, some weird sounds and all that. But
Jim, you got a great story of that drummer, that recording that.
This was back in when I was, launching my very first little recording studio, and this guy asked me if he could record a drum demo to send off to a band that he wanted to be a part of. And I'd never recorded drums before. I said, I'll give it a try. And I literally couldn't figure out what was going. I would listen back to the tracks and be like, there's something ringing in there. Like it's just hum, hum, hum. So we put tape on all the drums. Anyways, long story short, it ended up being the drummer. And as he would hit his snare, he'd go hum, hum, hum.
Was it like the head kind of making a little sound or something?
Yeah, he could not stop doing it either.
Wow.
So that's the last time I recorded drums ever.
I'm done with drums, man.
Do you ever miss those days, Steve? Like, do you ever wish that you could go back when, like, say, for instance, Chet signed you to your first deal, and that must have been quite exciting.
Well, I listen now. I've got some reel-to-reel half-inch tapes from the day. They're just roughs. I got them still, but when Chet Atkins took me into the studio, RCA, and I listen now, and I remember some of these, that stuff that never was released, but a couple of them I remember. I don't know why in the world, but it was my first record, first time in the studio, like a big studio with a real producer and all that. And it's Chet Atkins and Buddy Emmons is sitting there, Reggie Young and David Briggs, who played with Elvis, and it's who's who playing all these instruments, and I'm singing the vocal on these. I guess in my mind I was thinking I'll come back and sing later, I guess, but I'm going like I'm like half singing, like a real breathy, and I think, what am I doing? It's like that was the first session. I mean, I certainly have been in the studio before, and I'd recorded a bunch, but just not on that level. So I think I was holding back to come back and sing it later for real, I guess. But they never saw the light of day. So now when I hear them, I go, what am I doing? I don't know why I did that, but yeah, there's a lot I would do differently if I could go back in time with Chet Atkins and even like Jimmy Bowen and Tony Brown. I'd do stuff a little differently. But Jim, I was so young. We were touring 200 days a year or so and trying to make a record. And, I would shut down looking back. One of the things I would do is I would shut down and not even think about playing the road. And I'd be really rested. And I remember having hit records and couldn't even hardly talk, from being on the road. And you look back now and go, what was I thinking? But I guess I'm touring, trying to make a living, and got kids, but I would certainly, maybe take it a little more. I took it seriously, but I just had so many irons in the fire, I guess. And but anyway, I mean, you look back though and go, man, that was a great time. I remember looking in the control room and you'd see Chet sitting back there with a cigar. It was like the Beatles pictures, he had a black suit on with a little black skinny tie. He was dressed up for the session. Yeah. And a different era for sure. It was Studio A at RCA. And he didn't, by the time I got with him, Chet didn't smoke cigars. He just kind of chewed on them. He quit. Yeah. But he always had one, and you could smell it when you walked in the control room, Yeah. So great memories.
I think that must have been a real sort of old school producer thing, because I worked with the producer Nelson Larkin.
Oh yeah,
Nelson at all. But Nelson was the same way. He would just pull out and I would bring him Cuban cigars from Canada, because you guys couldn't get them at the time. And I always was just blown away by the fact that he never ever lit one. These really nice Cuban cigars, just chewed them.
He probably, it must be an old school thing or something. But I remember Chet would walk out my very first session. He walked out into the room. All the players were tuning up. Like I say, it was all like double scale players, I was blown away with this level of players. We had like eight players in the room, and this gigantic Studio A. And I remember I walked out, and Chet walked out with me and had a chart in his hand, the first song we were going to do. And when he walked out, all the players I never seen this in a session. All the players, when Chet walked in, they all just turned all their instruments off and laid them down and followed him. They all just went with him, like Pied Piper walking over to the piano. And then I kind of squatted down by the piano, David Briggs, and then we ran the song. And everybody was listening to what Chet had to say, his direction, And He said, well, the first song it's this, and what I want to do is kind of and explained it and gave out. And now fast forward to now, it's not even, that world is gone. There's not that world, not even anymore, in the studio,
Would you guys like cut like a number of songs in one session?
Yeah, we'd do a couple, try to get a couple a session, it certainly wasn't, I never felt ever rushed, because Chet he didn't push it, we got what we got when he was happy with it. But we would normally get a song an hour or so, I would guess. If I had to guess a time frame, we ran it a couple times, and then we ran it briefly and then turned the machine on, and you know, it was maybe did a couple takes and then moved on. It was the caliber of players was correct stupid, so it was, you know, they were fine tuning and tweaking on the fly, and then by the second or third, no more than 2 or 3 takes, you know, maybe, and then by the third take, usually then people wouldn't fix a few things while we listen back. Somebody may fix a place or something, but I mean, it was just magical. I loved it so much.
Yeah, records aren't made the same anymore.
It's a different world, isn't it, Darren? It's crazy.
I mean, you spend that much time just putting a drum track, like a beat together to play.
I'll work on things and I'll spend like days and days and days on just a drum and kind of percussive thing. And I'll laugh to myself and think, if I had a real player here, it would take 3 minutes to do this. But I'm taking days. But I mean, that's how you make it these days. It's how you do it. So, but,
were you as good as you are now when you started making records? Because, or were you intimidated? Like, I guess my question is, were you intimidated at all by some of those session players, or were you at that same caliber?
You know, Jim, that's really an interesting question. I honestly, and I don't mean this in a boastful way, but I actually think I'm a better player now than I was back then. I think I was musically speaking, playing wise, back then I never practiced ever. I just was on the road. That was my practice. So I was on the road all the time, and when I got home off the road, I'd like, I'm not. But I practice now. I work at it now, and I work and write, and I really try more than I did back then. I think playing wise, I may be better now. I think experience helps along too. You know, helps that just being older and wiser. I think singing wise, I think I was a better singer back then. But I think I'm a smarter singer now, because I know I may not be able to reach some notes, but I'm more cautious of what I'll do. I think I'm smarter singing wise. My voice is, I think I had more control back then. I think age does that to your voice. I think it just changes. You know, your vibrato gets wider and WI are wider, you know. But
it does. It definitely, that's one, I think. I mean, as far as if you don't have arthritis, there's no reason why your playing can't stay the same or get better. But I think the human voice just naturally just ages. But I think I don't know. I think there's something about your voice now, because I hear the stuff that you've done lately, and I think it's aged like a fine wine. Like, maybe you feel like you had better control back then, but I don't know. There's a little bit of edge in there now that I think actually makes it really great.
Well, the texture is different, that's for sure. And thank you for that. I listen to my old records, and I did have more. I had a more of a range. I could really go a lot higher back in the old days than I can now. But I'm thinking, why? To me, I think a lot of times I did stuff just because I could. You know, it's like, why? What's the point? I think now I'm smarter as far as I listen to the lyric, and I really try to figure out what the emotion is. I think about it more. Back then, I'm just some young dumb kid that's going, oh, I can do these tricks with my notes, and I can hit that high note. I can hit that real high note if I want to. I mean, I can't do that now, but I think I'm smarter, and I think the emotion part is more there now.
Yeah. And I would prefer any day to listen to an emotive singer than a technical singer.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's vocal calisthenics, you know, that's what I say. It's just because you can don't mean you should do it, you know. So.
And that's a young thing. I mean, that's what you do when you're young, player wise and singing wise. And then you just realize after a while that you don't have to do that. And I think when also being a young singer, young player, is that there's a part of you that still wants to impress the people that are around you.
Absolutely. And you know, you're right. And then you throw in, oh, I just had a #1 record.
Yeah.
Oh, I just had another hit record. Then you go, well, I'm king of the world. I can do, you know, you start getting these almost like you're reading your own hype, you know, so to speak. And then you start thinking that you get that confidence built up, and it can be great in some ways, but it can be not great in others. So sometimes I remember with my first #1 record, it was a song called All Roads Lead to You. And I remember at the party, we had this big first #1, RCA had a big party, and all my friends were there and stuff. And I remember when the night was over, I remember going back to my little apartment, and I remember I was sitting there and I was thinking, wow, I was kind of tired. And I go, unbelievable, a #1 freaking record. And then it dawned on me, I go, oh no, now what do? I got to be working on something else right now to follow it up, So I just kind of thought, well, you roll your sleeves up and go back to work. It's like winning I look at it kind of like winning a football game or whatever. It's like those coaches and stuff, they always say, oh, we're going to celebrate tonight. Then we're going right back to the drawing board and go to work. And I got a little full of myself for a moment. Then I go, oh, what do you do? Then you look at those guys that have done it for years and years and years, and you go, wow, they just keep coming with the hits. And it's one thing to have some hits, but just to maintain that level, it's unbelievable, the people that do it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get people who have hits after hit after hit after hit, especially after that first one. It is that pressure to come back and say, oh man, I got to do another one, or I have to try to get up there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's almost more pressure than trying to get the first one in the first place.
And then a lot of people this is this part that they don't see behind the curtain too, the fans and the people out there in the audience. They don't know that while you're having that #1, I'm speaking hypothetically, of course. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But they don't realize that, oh, you're in a fight with your record label at the same time, because maybe the head of the label is not real happy with you or something. And then now you throw that element into it too, where maybe your producer is leaving the label and going to another one. So there's all these.
Okay, now the truth comes out there. We got to get a bit of dirt out of you, my friend. We got to find out.
Hypothetically could happen. You don't know.
I mean, Fleetwood Mac rumors, everybody knows the story. Everybody's what a great album that is, but not a lot of people know that they were like mortal enemies when they recorded that record.
That's unbelievable. Eagles too. I've heard stories about them, of course, legendary stories, but it's not all smooth sailing behind the scenes, but it looks like it is on the radio, and you're touring, and then all the tumultuous things going on in the background sometimes behind this is not fun.
So when you left RCA then to move over to MCA, was that one of those kind of situations, or was it amicable, or what was it?
It was a little bit tumultuous in a way, because I won't get into a boring part of it, but let me put it to you this way. My producer at the time at RCA was Tony Brown, excuse me, and Nora Wilson. They co-produced me. We had Lonely Women Make Good Lovers and Midnight Fire. Hit records, but my contract was coming up at RCA, and my producer, one of the producers, Tony Brown, was moving over to MCA. He had already left and gone over there, and I had about 6 months left on my contract with RCA. So I really wanted to be with Tony Brown at MCA. So I kind of sat out and waited for my contract to expire. And then we had records, and we had a pretty good relationship with the label, but my big deal was with Noro and Tony. Those guys were awesome,
Right.
They were musical, and Tony Brown, both of them legendary producers. And then when Tony went to MCA, he started getting the wheels turning to kind of recruit me and get me over there. And as soon as my contract expired, I went to MCA, and our first records over there were hits. I had What I Didn't Do and Some Fools Never Learn. And
I was going to say, was that like Life's Highway and The Weekend?
Heart Trouble.
Yeah. Heart Trouble.
Yeah. Life's Highway a little bit later, but The Weekend.
Yeah. So what was the difference now if you're talking Tony Brown and any other producer you've worked with, even with Chet or anything? What made him that combination works so well?
I think I always enjoyed being with those producers that were players, and I've kind of always found myself being with most success I had was with songwriters or real music. I mean, they're not, most of them are, but they're not always. But I always really loved being like Tony Brown was a piano player. He worked with Elvis and toured with, the Hot Band, and he just had a great, he was a great musician and had a great ear, a great ear for songs. And then with Chet, of course, that musicality, I was touring with him while we were trying to make records too. I was actually playing in his band. So it was interesting with him. I definitely was intimidated being around him. And I was so young and just starting out. And Chet pulled me to the side one day, and I remember he looked at me. He could tell I was being intimidated and being like a fanboy, And I remember he called me over and he said, "Knock it off." And I go, "What? Excuse me?" And he goes, "You know what I mean, knock it off." And I go, "Okay." And so he called me out on being a fanboy,
Yeah, but I mean, Chet, if I'm not mistaken, he bestowed on you and only a handful of guitar players the sort of certification of calling you a CGP,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's correct. And he was doing a Monday night, kind of like Les Paul was doing in New York. But Chet was playing every Monday night at a cafe downtown, a restaurant called this escaped me. Anyway, the name of that restaurant will come back in a moment. I just went blank, but anyway,
it'll come back to you tonight at around 3 a.m.
And I'm calling you guys because I have both your own numbers. No, but I used to go down and listen to Chet and set in and play, and around that time he had an album he came out with an album called Chet Atkins CGP, and I asked him one day, I said, "What does that mean?" And he goes, "Well, I never gave myself. I mean, I never went to college and got a degree of any sort, so I just gave myself one. I made myself a CGP, certified guitar picker or player, And so then he had this idea. He and Paul Yandel, who played with him at Cafe Milano, was the name of that restaurant.
There you go,
Cafe Milano. And he and Paul had an idea to bestow this honor on Jerry Reed, who was a Chet disciple. And so, and he did it as Chet loved Mark Twain. This thing is very Mark Twainish. And it said, "Whereto as on this day, year of our Lord," and all these funny Mark Twain kind of things. And this proclamation, and he gave it to Jerry Reed. To this day, and this day making you an honorary CGP, certified guitar picker. And so he did that. Then he did another year went by, and he did it to 2 or 3 different friends of his. As it turned out, he did 5, I think, people and made them CGPs, gave them this honor. And then he became very ill, and it kind of ended that, and he passed. But
did he actually print it out, or write it out? Was
yeah.
That?
I have a proclamation hanging on the wall. It's in the hallway in the stair there, and
that's incredible, because I think it's just you and Jerry and maybe Tommy
Emmanuel,
yeah,
Australian guitar player who's phenomenal, and then John Knowles, who was Chet's guy, more academia. He wrote a lot of Chet's books and did a lot of his formal writing for Chet. Was his dear friend, a classical player. And John lives here in Nashville, and he made us. I think he made us. I think 4 of us. I think, and Jerry was the first. Jerry Reed. It's funny though, Jim. I don't know if you remember this, but I went down. Let me back up on that. I got a call one day. I had an instrumental that I had on one of my Capitol albums, and they called and said, "Man, congratulations, you're nominated for a Grammy." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that. That's so good. Who am I up against?" And they said, "Chet Atkins." And I went, the Grammys that year were in New York at Madison Square Garden. And so Karen and I go, we'll go. I know Chet's going to beat me. So we get to New York and I get a phone call and it's Chet. He left me a voicemail and Chet says, "Hey, Stevie, I'm calling you to tell you that I voted for you in the Grammys." He said, I really hope you win this. He goes, "I know I'm up against you, but I hope you win it. I voted for you." And he said, and then he goes, "By the way, I've already got 16 of them. Click." I've already got 16 of them.
You know what? I'll never forget going to see you and Chet. Well, sorry, I went and saw you at a private performance at the Opry Hotel. It was some gala thing, and Chet was in the audience, and you got Chet up to perform. And I'll never forget it when you said, "Oh, a good friend of mine's in the audience. Maybe if we give him some applause, he'll come up and play a tune." And of course, the place just went crazy. Like the place went nuts because it's Chet Atkins, right? Yeah. And I remember he came up on stage and he whispered something in your ear, and you laughed. And I remember I wanted to know what it was he said to you. And after the show, we were talking. I said, "What did Chet say to you when he came up on stage?" And he just leaned over and he said, "I get a standing ovation for just showing up."
I forgot that. Oh my God. I went with him one time, Jim. That's funny. I remember that night, by the way. That was fun. Who was the pro golfer there that was the world champ pro golfer was there that night?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember.
Yeah, another senior moment. I have a lot of those these days. But I remember I went with Chet one time. He called me and he said, "Hey, I'm getting this award. I've got to go downtown." And he said, me and John Fogerty and somebody else, they were getting this big award. It wasn't like an award show. It was just a luncheon kind of thing. And so I go, "Yeah, I'll go with you." So I went and we're standing there and the guy's going like, I watched him, John Fogerty, they gave him this award and he was gracious and we said hi to him and Chet's standing there and they're going like, "This guy's a legend." They're introducing Chet and Chet bends over to me and he says, "I'm starting to get all these awards because everybody thinks I'm getting ready to kick the bucket." When you get this old and start getting ready to kick the bucket, you'll be getting awards too. Like this.
Oh, that's so funny. One more quick Chet story because I thought this was really neat. When Chet passed away, and I know that was a rough time for you because you guys were close, and you went over to his house, and I remember you telling me that there was a beautiful bouquet of flowers on the table, and you asked Chet's wife who they were from, and she said, "Go look at the card," and you finish it.
Yeah, she was Leona was my sweetheart. I just loved Leona, Chet's wife, and she was just tremendous. And I felt so bad for her loss. And Jim, I went to her house and she came over like a mother would do. And I always had tears in my eyes. And she came over and was going like, "It'll be okay." She was consoling me. Wow. I was like, "This is backwards." And then I looked over, as you said, I looked over on the kitchen counter and there's this, I've seen big bouquets of flowers, but this was like 10 times that. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It just covered the whole thing. And as you alluded to, I said, "Gosh, Leona, who are those beautiful flowers for?" And she smiled and goes, "Go read the card," like that. And I went and looked at the big card on it and it said, let's see if hopefully I'll get this right. It said, "To Leona, I'm sorry you lost your great man, Paul McCartney."
Wow.
And awesome. That made me have such a new, if it's possible to have more respect for someone than I did after that, and I really respect.
You can almost hear Paul though talking to the florist going, "Make sure it's the biggest."
Yeah. And the songwriter him said, "Make sure you say,
yeah,
to Leona, I'm so sorry you lost your great man." Yeah. I guarantee you he was a stickler on how that was worded, you know.
For sure.
But anyway, I was gonna one little period on the end of the story a moment ago. So the night that the awards show, the Grammys, Chet beat me at the awards, and we laughed our heads off at his voice message. And then we went to the Grammys, and I got beat. And then when I get home the next week, Monday's coming up, and Karen gets a call from Chet, and he leaves a message on her voice, and he says, "Tell Stevie to come down to Cafe Milano next Monday." Actually, I think Karen talked to him because she told me later I was gone or something. But Karen said, "Well, I'll try." And I remember she said, Chet said, "No, don't try. He has to be there Monday." And so, Jim, I go down, and I get emotional telling this story right here. I get down to Cafe Milano that night, and I notice the place is packed, and there's guitar players, as there always is everywhere, really good guitar players. I saw Jimmy Olander and some great players. And Chet, I saw a bunch of cameras, still cameras and movie cameras, and so video cameras. And so Chet, halfway through the show, he goes, "Folks," he goes, "I won a Grammy this last week," and everybody claps. And he goes, "But there's a guy in the audience that I thought should have won a Grammy, should have won it. And I'd like to get him up here now. He should have won this." And he said, "So let's get him up, Steve Wariner." And I get up and I go, "What?"
Wow.
And I'm walking up I'm actually looking around going like, who's he talking about? And I walk on stage, and Chet hugs me, and I notice there's cameras are on me now. There's cameras follow me. And so Chet goes on to say, "You should have won this Grammy, blah, blah, blah." And he joked about, I've got 16 of them. And then he reaches down and he pulls up a Grammy, and he goes, "So I wanted you to have this." And he gives me a Grammy, and he says, "Folks, you can't give these to people." He said, "The NARAS frowns on that." He goes, it says it's actually not legal to give these away. And he goes, "And that's exactly why I put a plaque on it," had this plaque removed and remade, and it says, "On loan to Steve Wariner from Chet Atkins. So here's Steve." And he gave me his Grammy.
Wow.
And I still have it. I'm lucky to have 4 of those, and then the one that Chet gave me.
I was just going to say, was that before you won your actual first Grammy?
I think at that point I had 2 at that time, and then Chet gave me 1. But here's the O. Henry ending. Now Chet, I get done and I'm in tears, and so Chet goes, "But wait a minute," and he reaches behind his amp and he pulls out this plaque and he goes, "I want to make you a CGP too." And he makes this plaque, and he made me a CGP that night, the same night. So it was a heck of a night, you know.
No kidding.
And he's given you guitars too, has he not?
Yeah, I've got about 4 or 5 of his guitars, and he gave me a White Falcon back in '85 that I borrowed it, and he said, "Do you like that guitar?" And I go, "Sure, I love it." And he goes, "Well, you can keep it. It's the ugliest, gaudiest thing I've ever seen." So, because I can't stand that damn thing. And he goes, "If you want it, get it out of here." And I go, "Well, will you sign it for me?" He goes, "Sure." And I had him sign it across the front. You've seen it, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
If you had to leave your house, say there was an emergency, you can only take 1 guitar with you.
Oh, man.
I know that's a tough question.
It'd be rude, wouldn't I? I mean, it'd be.
What do you have? One you'd have to go for?
I'd probably have to grab my dad's guitar first. Yeah. One my dad, that 61 Jazzmaster that I learned to play on.
Yeah. But
then you think, well, the Chet guitars. I'd have an armful of guitars, I'll tell you that day. Jumping out the window.
You'd be outside and you'd be like, "Oh, did Karen make it out?"
Oh, I hope she don't hear that.
Karen,
she
grab a few guitars, would ya?
She already knows it, you know.
That's a tough thing with being a guitar player. The buying never stops, does it?
It's a habit. It definitely is an addictive habit. And I will say, though, I don't keep a lot of guitars here. I'd only have a handful here. I keep them elsewhere so that they're in a safer place. But I do have a handful here that I'm a little more manageable if I had to grab them. But I got some good ones, so I've been collecting through the years. I've got a lady gave me it's a 51 Nocaster what a Fender Nocaster before there was even a Telecaster. You know, it was her husband's. He bought it brand new.
I remember that story because I remember when you got that guitar.
Yeah.
And you were doing a show, and the family, I guess, wrote you a letter, or this is a while back, and said, we have some, you know, my husband's guitar, he wanted you to have it when he passed. He just recently passed. And I remember you thinking that it was just going to be some beater of some kind. And they
like, how nice. Yeah, that's nice. It's great. It's going to be it's 81 Telly or whatever. That's so nice. You know? And it would have been. But then we opened, my guitar tech goes out and brings her back, the lady and her daughter, and at the show. And this is right after the show. And Colin comes, my guitar tech comes up, and I said, Colin, what kind of case is it? And he goes, it's a 70s Telecaster Fender case. And I go, oh, that's awesome. How nice. 70s Tele. He said probably late 70s, the Tolex, if I had to guess. And so then we opened up the case, and I started looking and going like, and Colin did too. Our eyes both kind of went, and I started looking. I go, this is an old Telecaster. Then I started looking at the tree, the string tree, they call it up there, and then the pickups, and I'm going like, this is old, man. Did
you know right away that it was an Ocaster?
No, I knew it was old, but I didn't know. And then we took the neck 32351. It says penciled in the 323.
Wow.
I see 50, 51 or 50. I think 50. Anyway, there was only a 6-month period of time that there was no they originally called those guitars broadcasters. You guys probably already know this stuff, and then Gretsch already had a broadcaster, so they said no. So we already have a guitar here, guys. You can't have one called broadcaster. So legally they had to go cut off the name Telecaster off. All the 6 months of those got out with no name, and those eventually became known as Nocasters. And there's only 6 months worth of them out there. It made it.
Didn't he have his name in decals like Rusty or something like that, like on the guitar? I think.
No, but if you took I think what you're thinking of, Jim, is if you take the pickguard off, he had started to. You could see where he was started to make a pickguard. He started to make a homemade kind of leathery pickguard or something. You can see the remnants when you take the pickguard off. You know, he was going to do a Lefty Frizzell or some kind of thing, looks like, but he was a tinkerer, because underneath the pickguard you can see some little holes drilled. You don't see it with the pickguard on it, but I mean, that's so brilliant and nice of that family to gift me that guitar. I mean, I'm touched. I told his wife, she said, the only thing I want is I don't want anybody, I don't want to be any credit for this. We don't want any advertising. We don't want any, so we want to be anonymous, And I said, well, no worries on that. And I said, I'll let you know. Promise you I'll be playing this. And I played it on the Grand Ole Opry about 3 weeks later. And I had them drive. They came into Nashville, and I had them backstage. And she got to see her husband's guitar played on the Opry, So,
wow. That's a great story.
Kind of a nice tribute to him,
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of the Opry, now you've played on the Opry lately with no audience and that whole deal. What was that like? What's that experience like?
Well, I've done 3 Oprys in 2020. The first one, actually, no, I've done 4, because the first 2 was with no audience, 4,400 empty seats, and just the crew. There was only 10 people in the whole building, whole complex. Wow. Counting band and crew and stage hands and stuff. And that was the weirdest thing ever. Although doing my little Wariner Wednesdays, I sort of was used to it because of that. We did our Facebook Live Wariner Wednesdays 10 in a row every week. On Wednesday we did them. So, we still do them once a month. Yeah. We missed last month, but having done those, it made me kind of be aware of, you finish the song and then you have crickets,
Yeah.
So which I'm used to anyway, really, let's face it.
Hey, are you going to do any more of those Wariner Wednesdays? You've got one coming up, don't you?
We're going to do one December 9th. And I'm hoping to have maybe a special guest, possibly. Probably we'll do some Christmas songs. And so we're going to do my final 2020 Wariner Wednesday, December 9th.
Are you allowed to say who the special guest is, or are you allowed to give us a
yeah, I am. I don't. It's probably going to be possibly Ross, my son who lives in New York. Ross is coming home. If I can rope him into playing a whirly or something with me, or he'll be quarantined with us, of course. But I also thought about bringing in my friend Randy Hart, if I can talk him into it. He plays keys and a lot of stuff together, a lot of Christmas stuff. He knows my stuff better than I know my stuff. So I don't know.
Are you going to play?
Brian maybe too. So.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Please tell me you're going to play. I will have to say to you, your Christmas Memories album. What year is that? You know?
What was that, Jim? 90.
It's got to be early 90s. Right?
I was going to say like 93 maybe or something like that.
So we have in our household here, you know, there's just I'm going to say there's 2 records that we have to listen to. Like, it's just not Christmas.
Well, I know one's
the Carpenters.
I got
I got you going on that. I think I did.
Oh, man.
And the Carpenters and Steve Warner's Christmas Memories.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And sorry, if we're going to add one more, Guitar Christmas is pretty spectacular.
That was an interesting one. The Guitar Christmas, totally no accompaniment, no. I really didn't. It was really warts and all for real on that. I did most of it. You can tell it too when you hear it. Darren would hear it and go crazy probably because sometimes I listen now and go, ooh, I can tell I engineered that because I had my mic pre up too hot. I can hear where it's a little bit too, I got a little too loud right there, you know.
No. But you recorded that all in your studio.
Yeah, I did. And like I say, no clicks and I really didn't do much, warts and all, you know, and just kind of turned it on and played, you know. But the Christmas Memories, man, that's the only Christmas album I've done that's like a classic in the classic style, you know, of orchestrated. And I did 3 songs with the Chieftains.
You sure did.
Yeah.
Brown Bannister produced that album. We did it in like 3 different studios. Went to Ireland and did the stuff with the Chieftains. And then Nancy Griffith is on that album, and so Maura O'Connell, and let's see, Mark O'Connor, Chet Atkins is on it, of course.
Yeah.
Who other guests? I had some guests on there, but it was so fun, and just that, as you know, Jim, you and I have talked about this. It's a arranger season every Christmas. You and I love that Christmas music. I know, and I know we've talked about it. It's so much fun to play that music and those melodies and the chords and stuff every year. I look forward to it.
Well, that's what I love about that album is that it's current sounding, but at the same time, you really do pay homage to the classic Christmas records of the past. We
try to, yeah. And Brown Bannister was so good. The only album I ever made with him, but we got along so well. Most of it, we had a house down on Music Row. He rented a house for a while, and that whole house was made into a studio. And I remember he had some real old mic pre's and I think he had a C12, an old C12, and we just left all week. We would just leave everything. We never turned anything off. We just left it on burning all week, you know.
The cover of that CD, of course, or that record is famous because it's you and your boys, Ross and Ryan. And I'm going to guess that Ross is like about 3 years old in this picture.
Yeah, that's about right.
And I love this story because he's just smiling away, but you want to tell the story of it.
Oh, how deceiving that smile is! Right? You know better than anybody how Ross was when he was 3 and 4. 4, 5. Let me just say, when Ryan was young and a baby and even a young toddler, I remember thinking, people talk about this fatherhood stuff. this kid never makes a sound. He sleeps all the time. He's, you know, I got this thing, man. You know, I'd come off the road and go, yeah, this is not bad at all. It's sleeping through the night. And then Ross came along. Ross, I will say this now, Jim, we'll watch a video of when they were little, and Ross will look at me now. Sometimes he'll watch them and just go, oh my God, was I really that bad? Did I really do that?
I remember, so I just got to tell you the story really quick, because Ross was apparently not settling for this picture that you were putting on the front cover of your album. And he just wasn't, so you guys got on the phone and hired a clown. And the clown stood just outside of the lens beside the photographer. And it's the only way you can get Ross to smile for the picture. It's so great. Looking at that picture and knowing that is the best part of that album cover.
And you know, Jim, you know Ross, at that time, Ross was so spoiled. We had him so spoiled. I'll take the blame on that one. But he was so spoiled that if he got it in his, if he knew you wanted him to do something, then he would go the opposite way and you'd never get him to do it. He was just, he got it in his head. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, we've got one of those. His name's Ryan. and it's not anything to do with him being spoiled. It's just control. And I remember when I would come and of course you were always so gracious. Whenever I would come to Nashville, you would always say, don't stay in a hotel. You come stay at our place. And I would stay in your guest house. And often I would just say, you know what, guys, I'm going to take Ross to the mall. And I would just give you guys a bit of a break, because he wasn't bad. He just would not stop. He just would talk, but he was such an interesting young guy to talk to. I loved him.
And he turned into if I may brag a minute, you know, he turned into such a fine young man and was a composer and lives in New York. And he's very, I think he's very introverted, and now it's, I mean, totally not like that. Now he's so,
definitely a lot quieter now.
Yeah. And boy, he was on fire in those days. But I'll back up, Jim, and tell you the front part of that story you may or may not remember of the album cover. My friend in Indiana had that sleigh. He drove that down from Indiana. It was an old sleigh from late 1800s.
Wow.
This he collects antiques. This is an old sleigh. If you look at that picture again, it's beautiful. And anyway, so whose big idea was it to do this daggum album cover? Oh, it was mine. We'll get a horse. We'll get a dog. We'll get our boys. It'll be great. You'll love it. So the minute we get to that it was a tiny little photo studio. The horse, we got a horse wrangler on the horse. He brought the horse in. My friend owned the Dalmatian, Wood Newton, the songwriter Wood Newton. The dog hated the horse. So during the whole shoot, you could hear. I could hear the whole. I heard that dog, and you'd hear Wood go, "Sparky, quit it!" And then he'd quit, and then a few minutes later, you'd hear. And then the horse was backing up on that. I remember we rented that backdrop, and nowadays you would do like you're doing, Darren. You do think about. We spent all this money and had them fly a backdrop in that's a Christmas scene. That's crazy back in those days, but we did it. And the horse, how should I say? Well, let me just put it to you this way: the horse, we had to do a lot of cleaning before we sent it back. And then the dog hated the horse. Ross, we got him to smile. We had to hire a clown. And you remember the clown was there, and like somebody goes, "Well, I know a guy that we can." A clown, and like boom, the clown was there going like, "Hey, Ross, hey, like how did this clown get here? Does he live next door? He's here 2 seconds."
Any good photographer will always have a clown on hand.
Yeah, on standby.
And you know what? It felt like we worked for 5 hours to get that one snapshot that we used. It's like I've never been exhausted in my life,
That's pretty awesome. Do you still, I wanted to ask you about in your studio, you had those 2 Sony consoles.
Oh, the DMXR.
Yeah. I remember we stopped in one day when we were in town with Jim.
I remember that.
And saw those. And it's the first time I had seen the 2 of them. Where did they end up? Do you know? Or
yeah, we when those first came out, I remember seeing them at NAMM, and I flipped out over them because remember they hyped them as baby Oxfords. You know, they were a baby Oxford almost. You know, kind of like. And so I had Sony. We had them set up too, and we cascaded them, and we used them for a long time, and I really liked them. But we wound up, they just year by year, they just became more obsolete, you know. And Sony got to a point where they did not support them anymore. They just flat told you. We had a couple issues and would have to have someone service them. And Sony just flat got to a point where they said, nah, all we mess with now are TVs and blah, 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 whatever. Highline, you know, not those. So we, I sold them to a guy about 4 years ago. He probably uses them for boat anchors now. I don't even know what he uses them for. I don't know. But this guy was all over him. He had a whole collection of the DMXR 100s, and I'm really shocked that we found someone that wanted them. But I mean, obviously, there's people that still look for that stuff. But man, they really got obsolete. But I liked them, and we got our use out of them for many, many years. I've made a lot of records, and we won a Grammy on those 2 things. So that Chet Atkins record, we cut on those, and I got my half-inch machine, my Ampex half-inch machine that we used, and that's all the vintage, you know, the vintage gear I use, but some old ribbon mics that I use too. But I got Chet's right there. I got his Macintosh gear, Jim, if you remember. It was in his, I don't know, Darren, if I had it out then, but it's some Macintosh gear that was Chet's that was in his office when I met him, and that was his stuff he listened to music on.
Wow.
So he gave it to me many years ago as a Christmas present.
Wow.
Jeez.
But I'm just totally in the box now. Like I don't even have a console now. I just use I'm in the box with the Pro Tools, and you know, Ross uses, my son Ross, we have Ableton. He uses Ableton all the time, and I use Pro Tools. So when he's here, he has Ableton here on, if I have it for him. He's getting ready to be here for a couple months and work up here. And but I thought about getting an API console. Just they make a hybrid now, more of a smaller little API. You probably know the one I'm talking about, but I'm thinking about doing that. I really like, I'm old school. I like having faders. And,
me too.
And using the faders, but
there is something about going back, right? Because I find that when you work in the box, as they say, that do you find that music becomes sort of more visual, like you're just constantly staring at the screen and you're not really trusting your ears, whereas if you're using faders and you're dialing stuff in with your hands, you're allowing your ears to do the work?
I have a theory on that, and I think I'm probably not alone in this, but I think musicianship in the old days, when I say that, I mean even way back, you know, I think old days, 40s, 50s, 60s, I think the musicianship was so much greater than now because people did use their ears. I find myself all the time going like, why am I staring at this stupid waveform? There's nothing to see here, folks. You know, it's like, you need to be using your ears, you know. And back in the old days, they'd make records. I didn't do this, but I remember hearing people talk about it. They would do the direct to disc, you know, people, if anybody messed up, you had to start over. Everybody went again, you know, there was no, and that made the musicianship really, really go to another level because you didn't want to be that one guy that messed it up over and over, you know, so, because it's going.
But then also there was a certain amount, like there were the odd, I mean, you can dial up any old record, Beatles, anything from the 40s, 50s, Elvis, and there's mistakes on there.
Oh, definitely. There's speeding up, there's mistakes, there's wrong notes, and you know, but I think that's part of the charm of some of those records. You know, you listen to records in the old days, but pre-click, you know, and they by the end of the record, you're up 3 clicks from where you started, you know.
Right.
then it was, bazillion selling record,
And so now you can fix everything. So is that a good thing? I mean, if you can go in and take every kick and every snare and line them up perfectly, is that a good thing? What's your opinion?
In my humble opinion, I think it, it depends on who you're working with. If you got people that understand, that there's no such thing as perfect, and that the tuning, what I don't like is when people just tune and slide and move things just as part of the process, even if they don't even necessarily need it, they just do it. That's what you're supposed to do. To me, it takes the real out of the feel and the realness and out of the record. There's nothing. If I can do it with everybody in the room, I'd much rather do it that way. When that feel and it's a performance, and I'd much rather do it that way. Having said that, damn, it's great, isn't it, to be able to do it this way, and then you can tune something if you want to. So yeah, I mean, we're spoiled having both worlds. So I do
has its pluses and minuses, really. Like
yeah,
you can fix those things that, sometimes you have that great track and there was just one thing or that wasn't quite right, but then you can fix it. But I think too many people get a track that they think is pretty good. It's pretty good and we can fix it later instead of getting a really great track and maybe fixing one thing.
Aaron, you're hitting on it exactly. Yeah, you can't fix bad to start with. It's just bad's always going to be not good enough, but that's what I meant, what you're saying exactly when I say you get the right people that understand it, and you do. If you understand that you get a really good performance, and then if you need to fix something, a note or two, or just so like you say, so many people just do it because they use it as part of the process. But yeah, there's like we're saying, there's nothing like when everybody's on the same, little stars line up and everybody's on the same wavelength. I tell you a record that I did that on, and I'm dropping names here, but Garth Brooks cut my song Long Neck Bottle.
Yeah.
I wrote that with Rick Carnes, and Garth asked me to play on it. And we go in, we run it with the band, everybody hears it, we run it a couple times, and then they go, well, let's put one down. And so we put it down, and I'm sitting there watching. I could see Garth, he's 4 feet from me in a booth, and he's tearing it up, man, and I played the solo. And as soon as we finish, we're all, the energy, my adrenaline is so high, I'm like, oh my God, that was so good. And I did a scat solo on it. I just did it. We didn't even discuss it before. The engineers were probably going like, what the hell? Because I don't know if it was too loud or I just did it. And then so when we walk in the room, they all go, oh, I love that scat. So it must have worked. We listened to it. And then we go back, they go, well, let's just do another take. We did 2 takes on Long Neck Bottle, and they wound up using that first one. It was just a first blush. It wasn't even, I mean, I think somebody might have fixed something maybe, but like redo like part or two. But that was just the first thing that popped out.
I was at your place. I don't know if you remember this. I was in the kitchen when you got the call that Garth was cutting.
How many backflips did I do? I don't even remember. Was that
a lot? and I will also remember that's when you started kind of going, I'm going to build a studio on my property.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Because you had a great studio in your house. But then I remember hearing you talking about, I think we're gonna build a studio on the property. And I remember the first time coming to your place to see this, and I don't know what I was imagining, like a garden shed or something, And the thing that when I walked in and there's an elevator, and it's like, oh, okay, this is serious.
I mean, who don't need an elevator, Jim? You got to have one. I remember we were building this place, and Karen called me one day, and she said, we haven't even poured the footer yet. We're just getting ready to break ground. And Karen goes, well, I found an elevator. And I go, what? And she found somebody they had started to build a house, and then I guess for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And so they were selling their lift, And so we built plans around that stupid elevator. So, and then by the way, that's the Jerry Reed elevator. Thank you. It's called the Jerry Reed elevator. And the reason is Jerry used to come out here. His last 2 albums that he did, we did here. And we would always, when we walked in the door, we would always come up the steps, and Jerry would always veer to the left. We're on for people out there, we're on the 2nd floor, obviously, but it's in the corner of the building, and the steps are on the other corner. So Reed would always start heading to the left corner of the building in the garage, and we'd go to the right. And Jerry, his own words, he would always say, "You suckers can go up the stairs. I'm going to take the Jerry Reed elevator." And so after he did that every day, he would say, "I'm going up the Jerry Reed elevator. See you guys." And he never went up the stairs. And so we'd always meet him up here. And then so after there's a sign in there now that says the Jerry Reed elevator. After he died, I put a sign up that says the Jerry Reed elevator.
That's so great.
And then the up and down, I put a little sign on the up. It says, on the up, I have a little sign that says eastbound, and then the other one, it says down.
Nice. That's awesome.
That's really good. So is there anybody that you haven't worked with that if you have to say, I haven't had a chance to work with this person and I always wish I could? Is there that one person out there?
I mean, we talked about Paul McCartney. If we're going to throw out names, I mean,
yeah.
I would love to do something. And, it's so funny. I was always hoping that I might be around him because of Chet's relationship with him. I was with Chet 2 or 3 times when he would get a letter from Paul and Linda, or he got Christmas cards, or I was with him in London one time when Paul called him and they were talking, and Chet was going like, "It's Paul McCartney." I'm like, "Oh my God," And so, I always had hoped that our paths might cross via Chet, but it never really panned out. But that's somebody I've always admired. There's many, of course, but that's one person I'd love to be around. I just admired his writing and musicianship for so long.
What about Ringo?
Ringo, these guitar players. Yeah, I met Ringo, as you know, Jim. I met him about a year ago. I met him and chatted a minute. And I was talking to Ringo, and Steve Lukather from Toto was playing with the All-Star band, Ringo. Yeah. And now Ryan and I were talking, my son, we were talking to Ringo, getting a picture and talking to him. And he's very cordial, very nice. And right when I was talking to him, Steve Lukather at the Ryman, he walks around the corner and he goes, "Steve." And I go, "Steve." And we hug it out. And Ryan later said Ringo just looked at him and goes, "These guitar players, they all know each other." Ryan said, and Ringo kind of started walking off, almost like he was annoyed, like, "These guitar players, they all know each other, don't they?"
I had to laugh at Lukather like a few weeks ago, and I think you posted or liked his post on Instagram or something where he had a noisy neighbor. And he took his guitar amp outside like 6 a.m. and turned it like up to 11.
It was great.
It was awesome.
He set up a giant stack of Marshalls and went outside, and he goes, "Oh yeah, we'll have some of this."
Wow. I love it.
He is a great guy. Funny dude, man.
Yeah, he's I seen him at the Damn Show this past year in a Red R thing, and he has some great stories. Just
what, you're talking about playing with people. I've been so blessed, man, to get to play with different people. I mean, last October, almost a year ago, a little over a year ago, I did a thing with Brian May, and I played with it was a James Burton festival. He does this thing every year, and the money, it's for a charity, and he brings in all these, he's James Burton, so he knows everybody, all these rock gods. I mean, he is a rock god himself. But so I get to the show, and there's so many people on the show, and so I keep saying, "James, when do you want me to play?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know, I'm not sure." And then it was coming down for the show to start, and I go, "James, when do you want me to play?" And he goes, "I think about 3/4 the way down. I was going to have you open the show, but So all these people started playing. And then so Randy Gardner, my Jim, Randy, my engineer that works up here a lot and been with me for 25 years. Randy was with me, and he comes up and he says, well, I got good news and bad news. I know when you're going on. It's about 3/4 down in the show. It's at the Skirmerhorn, our symphony hall. And he says, the good news is you're about 3/4 down in the show. The bad news is you're going to follow Brian May, and you're on right after Brian May and right before Joe Walsh. And I go, oh, okay, great. And so I stood on there, and Brian, I got to hang out with him. He was such a gentleman, loved meeting him and hanging out. And so, right, I'm standing up there watching, and he's going on, and he's out there, and the place is packed, and he's killing. And he does his set, and he gets done, and he lays his guitar down. Thank you. It's Brian May from Queen, for God's sake. He walks off, and then they go, now here he is, Steve Wariner. And so I walk out, and I play by myself. He played with the whole band, a band that they had together, and then I played by myself. And first words, I go, well, nothing like coming out after Brian May and before Joe Walsh. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. But I did really well, okay. And then when I got done, I walked off, and Joe Walsh came over to me and gave me a hug. And so I go, man, I left something for you, Joe. Go get him, man.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But we're lucky, aren't we? All of us are lucky to get to play with who we've played with through the years. Some of my fondest memories are recording with Glenn Campbell, and I did a duet with Barbara Mandrell, Nicolette Larson. I did a duet with her one time. Just on and on, getting to play with so many cool people, through the years. And
yeah, and it all started with Dottie West.
It sure did.
Yeah.
Yep, up in a little nightclub in Indianapolis called the Nashville Country Club. She said, can you go on the road with me tonight? And I go, I'm 17. I'm a senior in high school, Dottie. Come on. I'm still in high school, So.
I look forward to hearing you play with McCartney.
Say that again, Jim. I'm sorry.
I look forward to hearing you play with McCartney. Well,
gosh, I don't know that that's ever going to happen. He certainly don't need me to play with him, but I would love it. Wouldn't that be great?
Actually, I think he would benefit greatly from having you.
Well, I tell you what, it would be fun. I know for real. I would be. You could probably hear you'd think it was castanets, but it would be probably my teeth chattering. I'd be so scared.
I think your version of Get Back was probably the best thing on that Come Together compilation.
Wasn't that a cool album? I mean, that whole album was a great idea. And the guy that Brent Hedgecock did a video for us. I wasn't even on that label, if you remember. I was not on Capitol yet. I was still on Airstream back then. And they had us do that version of Get Back. And they asked me what I wanted to do, and that's what I picked. But boy, that guy Brent Hedgecock, he did a video. Remember that video, Jim? It was
sure do.
So fun. It was kind of a takeoff on the Beatles, Beatlemania of the early '60s.
Yeah.
So fun. But yeah, that was great.
Excellent. Well, I know we've taken a bunch of your time, and I really, really appreciate it. And looking forward to bringing Turning the Road to everybody, so they get to hear that and see that. And
oh man,
that was a real pleasure being able to work on that.
Thanks, Darren. Same, my pleasure, man. And hearing you guys, what you did to it, and getting a chance to sing and do a little bit of the string stuff was fun. And anytime I can work with my buddy Jim, I'm in on it. So it was so much fun, and I'm so proud of that song to start with, Jim. That's a goodie right there. We've written a lot of songs together, man, and
we sure have. And that's definitely at the top of the list there
I was thinking about how many tunes we've written, man. It's a bunch. And Darren, you put some magic on it. It really sounded great. And
thank you.
I can't wait to see the video. Send me that video. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'll do it right away. It's
it's cool to be on that stuff and get to still be doing music. It's fun, and I love doing it.
Let's just keep doing it. All right.
And our song, we're just a couple of buddies, Jim. We got to, man.
Yeah, that I can't wait for everybody to hear that one too.
That's gonna be good, right? So always good. Now let's keep doing it.
Awesome. Well, if anyone listening wants to stay in touch with what you're doing, what's the best way to stay in touch? Facebook and the usual stuff?
all the usual places. I'm on Instagram a lot, of the Facebook. I have a website, just stevewariner.com. So yeah, all those places, so.
It's funny. I look back and I've done a bunch of live sound over the years, and on the back of my head, there's always one person I thought, if I ever had a chance to mix a show and there'd be, 2 or 3, you were always on the list. I've always wanted to mix a Steve Wariner, because your vocals are so great and the playing's so great. And
Thank you.
if there's ever a chance to slide me in for one show, even if it's, in the basement somewhere.
You better be careful. I'm calling you, man. I'm serious. That's awesome. If we can get back to playing live shows, man.
I'll stand back at the board with him, Steve, and I'll just every once in a while lean over and mute you.
Turn Terry up, No, you're going to be on stage playing piano. Are you kidding?
Okay. Yeah.
There's
a
show, speaking of muting, I'll end with this. I tour with this show. It's kind of a Jersey Boys type of show. And at the end of the show, all the guys kind of come out and they say, and John, and, and they give and there's one guy that always thinks he's the best. And his name was Rick. And every time he'd come out, he'd be, and I mute every single time. So it'd be, and it would be nothing every single time.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. I tell you what, I always say the front of house guy, that's who you kiss butt. You take care of that guy, because your whole world is in his hands, man.
Yeah.
I always, yeah.
Well, thanks again, Jim and Steve. And it was a great conversation and great stories. Yeah.
Really, really, really fun.
Really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.